Lyra moved carefully through the crowded alleys of the city, her glowing skin dimmed by dust and exhaustion. Every corner was a struggle. The streets were alive with movement. Floating vehicles zipped overhead, market stalls spilled their bright wares into the walkways, and aliens of all shapes and sizes hurried past, focused on their own lives. Lyra had nothing. She had not eaten properly in days. Her stomach growled with pain, and her small frame shook with cold. She kept to the shadows, avoiding anyone who might notice her weakness. She had learned early that asking for help in this city was often worse than begging for scraps. Some citizens ignored her, some scowled, and some, the gangs that roamed the alleys, took what little she had managed to scavenge. Lyra had nothing to offer them, so she ran. She darted between stalls, slipped under arches, and hid behind crates filled with exotic fruits she could not afford. Her hunger had made her small and quick, but it had also made her weak. As the sun began to dip behind the tall crystal towers, casting long shadows across the streets, Lyra found herself near the edge of the city, where the crowd thinned and the noises of commerce softened into quiet hums. Here she noticed a faint smell that made her pause. It was not the usual scent of garbage or spoiled food that she had learned to recognize. It was warm and inviting, sweet and savory at the same time, something she had only ever imagined in her dreams. She followed it cautiously, her curiosity stronger than her fear. The smell led her to a small, unassuming diner tucked between two glowing towers. Its windows were fogged with steam, and the door opened to the rhythmic sounds of pots clanging and food sizzling. Lyra hesitated at the doorway. She had never been inside a place like this. Humans ran diners on her planet, but they were rare and mostly found in wealthier districts. She wondered if she could dare step in. Inside, the diner was small but welcoming. The walls were lined with wooden shelves, filled with jars, spices, and colorful ingredients from all over the galaxy. A warm light bathed the room, and the smell enveloped her, making her stomach ache in longing. Behind the counter stood a human, his hair tied back, apron dusted with flour, and hands moving skillfully as he prepared a dish. The man noticed her immediately, his eyes kind and unjudging. He didn't shoo her away. Instead, he smiled and held out a small plate of steaming food. Lyra froze, unsure if this was real or some trick. Hunger had made her cautious, but the smell was too strong, too tempting. Slowly, she stepped forward and took the plate. She could feel the warmth seep into her cold hands. With trembling fingers, she brought the food to her lips. The first bite made her eyes widen. The flavors were unlike anything she had ever tasted. Sweet, salty, and spicy all at once. A perfect harmony that made her forget her fear and pain, if only for a moment. "Eat," the human said softly. "Take your time. You look like you need it." Lyra nodded, almost unable to speak. She ate quickly at first, then more slowly as she realized she was safe. She did not feel judged. She did not feel threatened. For the first time in days, she felt cared for. The human watched her quietly, giving her space, but never turning away. When she had finished, she felt a little strength return. She dared to look up at the man. Why are you helping me?" she asked. Her voice was weak, but sincere. "Everyone deserves a chance," the man replied. "You don't have to be alone. Not all of us will turn away." Lyra blinked. No one had ever said such words to her. Most people had ignored her, and some had tried to take her. Her heart felt a strange warmth. She wanted to ask more questions, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she only nodded. I can work," she said finally. "I can help. I don't need to eat for free." The human, whose name she soon learned was Marcus, smiled wider. "I was hoping you'd say that. How about starting tomorrow? You can be my assistant. I'll teach you everything I know about cooking." Lyra hesitated. She had never worked for anyone. She had survived on her own, scavenging and hiding, always running. But something in Marcus's eyes told her she could trust him. She nodded again. "Okay, I will try." The next morning, Lyra arrived early. Marcus greeted her with another plate of food, but this time it was for learning, not just survival. He showed her how to wash and chop ingredients, how to measure spices, and how to handle hot utensils without burning herself. At first, Lyra was clumsy. She dropped bowls, spilled sauces, and sometimes forgot steps. Marcus was patient, correcting her gently and showing her how to improve. "What matters," he said, "is not how fast you learn, but that you care about what you do." Cooking is more than recipes. It is about giving people hope, giving them joy through food. Lyra listened carefully. She had never thought of food as more than survival. But as she watched Marcus cook, she began to see it differently. The way he moved, the way he tasted and adjusted, the way he served with a smile. It was all part of something bigger than herself. Days passed, and Lyra's skills improved. She learned to prepare simple dishes, then more complicated ones. Her alien senses gave her an unusual edge. She could detect subtle flavors and aromas that humans often missed, and Marcus began to incorporate her suggestions into the menu. Together, they created dishes that were unique, exotic, and delicious. Word of the diner began to spread. Patrons came not just for the food, but for the experience. They noticed Lyra's dedication and skill. They noticed her care and creativity. Marcus would watch her work, sometimes with pride, sometimes with amazement at her natural talent. She was no longer the scared, hungry girl in the alleys. She was a valued part of the diner, a creator, and a learner. One evening, as the diner closed and the last customers left, Lyra sat with Marcus, tasting a new sauce she had prepared. "I never thought I could do this," she admitted. "I never thought anyone would trust me." Marcus shook his head. "It was never about trust alone. It was about giving you a chance. And look at you now. You are more capable than you know." Lyra smiled faintly, feeling a swell of pride. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like an outsider. She had a place where she belonged. She had a purpose. And she had someone who believed in her, even when she could barely believe in herself. Outside, the city continued its chaos. But inside the diner, there was warmth, laughter, and the aroma of cooking. Lyra's journey from desperation to hope was just beginning. She knew the streets would not be easy, and life would still present challenges. But with Marcus's guidance, her new skills, and her own determination, she felt ready to face whatever came next. She had learned more than cooking in these few days. She had learned patience, perseverance, and the value of kindness. She had discovered that even in a harsh world, humans could show compassion, and that one person's belief in her could change her destiny. By the end of her first week, Lyra could manage the kitchen with confidence. She could greet customers, prepare dishes independently, and even suggest improvements to Marcus's creations. She began to feel pride, a feeling so new that it was almost overwhelming. She was no longer just surviving, she was living. As the diner closed for the night, Lyra stepped outside, looking at the glowing towers and floating vehicles. The city had not changed, but she had. She felt stronger, smarter, and more capable. The fear that had haunted her for so long was fading, replaced by determination. She would continue to learn. She would continue to grow. She would not let her past dictate her future. Lyra returned to the diner the next day with renewed energy. Marcus greeted her with a smile and a plate of food, but she had learned something important. She did not need to be hungry to learn, to grow, or to hope. She had found a place where her skills mattered, where her presence was valued, and where her life could change for the better. In a city full of chaos and indifference, Lyra had found her haven. And in the heart of a human chef's diner, she had found a spark of something extraordinary, a chance at a future she had never imagined, a future filled with possibility, and a chance to become more than a desperate, hungry girl in the streets. Lyra's story was only beginning. Lyra's days at the diner had become routine, but the routine no longer felt dull. Every morning she arrived with energy and purpose, ready to learn, cook, and create. Marcus noticed her growing confidence. She moved through the kitchen with a steady rhythm now, chopping, stirring, and tasting with care. The other staff had begun to respect her instincts. Her alien senses picked up flavors and aromas that humans often overlooked, and Marcus encouraged her to experiment, combining ingredients in ways even he had never imagined. One morning, a delivery arrived with rare spices from distant planets. Marcus handed them to Lyra with a challenge. "I want you to make something new today," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Something no one has tasted before." Lyra hesitated only briefly. She had grown bold in the kitchen. Using the spices, she carefully measured, combined, and tasted. Her hands moved with confidence, her mind imagining flavors blending into harmony. When the dish was finished, she presented it to Marcus. He tasted it slowly, then smiled widely. "This is extraordinary," he said. "You've created something special. People will remember this." Word of the diner's new dishes spread quickly through the city. Curious citizens and travelers came from across the planet, eager to try the unique flavors created by the human chef and his alien apprentice. Lyra loved the attention but remained humble. She knew her journey had begun in hunger and fear, and she had no desire to forget that. She treated every customer with warmth, listening to their feedback and smiling as they praised her creations. But life outside the diner was never easy. One afternoon, a sleek, intimidating fleet of corporate inspectors arrived. They represented the Intergalactic Food Conglomerate, a massive organization that controlled much of the city's dining establishments. They had heard of Marcus's diner and its growing popularity and were determined to buy it, or shut it down. Lyra watched from the kitchen as Marcus calmly greeted the inspectors. Their voices were sharp, their questions probing, their tone commanding. They offered money and prestige, warning Marcus that refusal could have consequences. Marcus stood firm, refusing their offer. Lyra felt a surge of pride and fear. Pride because she admired his courage, fear because she remembered what the streets had taught her. Power and greed could crush even the strongest. Later that night, Lyra and Marcus sat together discussing their options. "They won't give up easily," Marcus said, concern in his voice. "We need a plan to protect the diner." Lyra thought for a moment, her mind racing. She had learned to notice patterns and details in her time surviving on the streets. Using her alien senses, she could detect things humans might miss, the subtle rhythms of movement, the faint signs of surveillance, the hidden intentions behind polite words. "I can help," she said finally. "I can watch for trouble, notice things before they happen, and find ways to keep the diner safe." Marcus smiled, trusting her judgment. "You've grown strong and capable, Lyra. I think we can face this together." The next few days were tense. Inspectors returned trying to intimidate staff, but Lyra and Marcus stayed calm. Lyra observed every interaction, noticing weaknesses in their approach. She suggested small changes to how the diner operated, rearranging tables for better visibility, timing deliveries to avoid crowded inspections, and creating special dishes that drew customers' attention and loyalty. Slowly, the inspectors realized that the diner could not be easily shaken. Lyra's confidence grew with every success. She realized that her hunger, fear, and struggle had given her skills and instincts that were invaluable in the kitchen and beyond. She was no longer the desperate girl of the alleys. She was a protector, a creator, and a leader. Other staff began to follow her guidance, trusting her insights and learning from her observations. One evening, as the diner prepared for a large crowd, an emergency arose. A group of street gangs, recognizing Lyra from her past, attempted to intimidate the customers. The city's streets were dangerous, and Lyra felt a flash of fear. But she remembered Marcus's lessons. Courage and quick thinking could overcome danger. She moved calmly through the diner, positioning staff, securing entrances, and speaking to the gang leaders with firmness. "Leave," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "This place is protected. You will not harm anyone here." The gang members hesitated. They were surprised by her confidence and the presence of a crowd that supported the diner. Lyra's calm and assertive stance, combined with Marcus's support, convinced them to leave without violence. The customers cheered quietly, grateful and impressed by Lyra's bravery. That night, she realized that survival was not just about avoiding danger. It was about facing it with courage, intelligence, and determination. The diner continued to thrive. Lyra began experimenting more boldly, creating dishes that reflected both human and alien culture. She used colors, textures, and flavors that were unfamiliar to human palates but irresistible. Patrons came not only for the food but for the experience, to taste something new and feel the warmth of a place where kindness and creativity reigned. As months passed, Lyra took on more responsibility. She trained new apprentices, teaching them not only to cook, but to observe, adapt, and care. She created a small network of young aliens and humans who had nowhere else to go, giving them hope and purpose just as Marcus had given her. The diner had become more than a place to eat. It was a sanctuary, a school, and a community hub. One day, news arrived of a festival celebrating the diversity of the city. Marcus suggested that Lyra lead the diner's participation. She was nervous. It would be a public event with competition and scrutiny. But she accepted the challenge. She planned a menu that blended human recipes with alien ingredients, incorporating techniques she had learned from both her own instincts and Marcus's guidance. The festival day arrived, and Lyra worked tirelessly, preparing dishes with precision and care. When the judges tasted her creations, their expressions changed from curiosity to amazement. The flavors were bold, yet balanced, traditional, yet innovative. The crowd clapped and cheered, impressed by the young alien who had risen from hunger and despair to create something extraordinary. Lyra felt a rush of emotion. She remembered her first days, hiding in alleys, desperate for a single meal. She remembered Marcus offering her food and trust when no one else would. She realized how far she had come. Her life had changed completely. She was no longer defined by her hunger or fear. She was defined by her courage, her creativity, and her determination to make a difference. As the festival ended and the diner returned to its quiet rhythm, Lyra reflected on her journey. The city was still vast and challenging, full of unknown dangers and opportunities, but she felt ready for anything. She had learned that kindness could change lives, that courage could overcome fear, and that talent and determination could transform destiny. One evening, as the diner closed and the last customers left, Marcus and Lyra sat together, exhausted but content. "You've grown so much," Marcus said softly. "I'm proud of you." Lyra smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing. You taught me to believe in myself." Marcus shook his head gently. "No, Lyra. You gave yourself the chance. I only guided you. You were the one who chose to grow, to learn, and to face every challenge. That is what makes you remarkable." Lyra looked around the diner. The dishes were clean, the kitchen organized, and the aroma of cooking still lingered in the air. She felt a deep sense of belonging. She had found a place where she mattered, where her skills were valued, and where her presence made a difference. She had turned her desperation into opportunity, her hunger into creativity, and her fear into courage. In the days that followed, Lyra continued to expand her skills and influence. She explored new recipes, collaborated with visiting chefs, and shared her knowledge with anyone willing to learn. She became a symbol in the city, a reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, determination, creativity, and human and alien kindness could transform lives. Her relationship with Marcus grew as well. It was not one of dependence, but of mutual respect and trust. They worked together as partners, each learning from the other, blending human ingenuity with alien intuition. Together, they had created more than just a successful diner. They had created a legacy of hope, creativity, and resilience. Lyra sometimes returned to the alleys where she had once scavenged for scraps. She remembered the cold nights, the hunger, and the fear. But she did not feel sadness or regret. Instead, she felt gratitude for Marcus, for the opportunities she had been given, and for the strength she had discovered within herself. She had been hungry and desperate, but she had survived, learned, and thrived. Her fate had turned, and the future stretched before her, full of possibilities she had never imagined. The city continued to bustle, full of challenges and surprises. But Lyra walked through it with confidence, her steps sure and her heart full. She knew that no matter what came next, she could face it. She had learned the greatest lesson of all, that life could change in an instant, that kindness could open doors, and that even the most desperate beginnings could lead to extraordinary journeys. Lyra's story was no longer about hunger or survival. It was about growth, courage, and hope. And as she prepared another dish for the next customer, smiling at the joy it brought, she knew that her journey was only just beginning. She was ready to meet the future, not as a frightened, hungry girl, but as a confident, capable, and creative young chef who had turned her fate into something extraordinary.